This one's number 2 here for a reason. I talked about this been a few months at this point on my YouTube channel about how to make a really easy quantum tunnel effect occur. I was just watching Anton Petrov's video that goes over some research used by some PhDs. Apparently put it out a month ago. It says groundbreaking research used quantum effects and not heat to drive pistons. Now, there are no real pistons here, but the principles in my first video a few months ago before he made this one are effectively the same thing that he's talking about. It's effectively electromagnetic fields, electric fields, and some light. But it's using a particle accelerator-like design to order the given fermions, apparently is what they're called. I just call them atoms and whatever the fuck you want to call them. I don't really ever give a shit because it's like, who cares? There's a classification, categorization matters. And it's like, you're right, for what it's worth, if I was in an institution, in a college and whatever, I'd have to tell you the things that you wanted to hear, the way you wanted to hear them. And I would do that. But, I'm not. And I don't have any, in any way, PhD, and no mechanical engineering, and all that. But the point is, using a particle accelerator as you accelerate something in a linear fashion, and you happen to effectively take one singular one in the center, and then you take a secondary one next to it, and you line it up in a sort of slight curve, and then get it back into its, similar direction, using instead of a colder state, we're going to be making an ordered state by effectively making electromagnetics take a possibility, as I like to call it, of movement away from it. Right? It can't move over here. It can't move over there. It can't do this. It can't do that. Heck, it has no ability to react over here. It has no ability to react over there. And using light to more correct, like an inertial confinement, optical tweezers type of situation with an electromagnetic field and a electrical field, charge field in this instance, to effectively create what is a ionic implasmification, which I don't really view it that way because that's not what it is, but it's two charge differences that we're creating that want them to be opposite at first, then we're going to switch them into a similar. We're going to create an entanglement that allows for an alignment during a given spin as it accelerates and removes further and further the amount of movement into the correcting of those given energy states, electromagnetic and electrical fields. See, the fields that are already there are going to start draining that energy as it moves kinetically in a given direction. Sort of like it's using that friction, moment of friction, heat, into creating a entanglement profile. Now, I called it a faux entanglement because it's not really ever going to entangle anything. They're going to get really stupidly close, and then using a little bit of extra light and electricity, apparently they're called bosons, sure, whatever. Apparently, they're bosons. I don't really care. For me, it's like, well, this field's already here, and it can effectively be excited in such a way that in its given virtual state of having increased likelihood chance of popping down back into a state where it exists now for us, in a regular fermionic state, it happens to come effectively in a tunneled, togethered point. So One side of them is going to become far more Schrödinger-esque, meaning superpositional-like. The other one's very obviously observed, because it's feeding its information to another one that is less observed. Then, using a little bit of electricity and a little bit more, effectively, effort by us, we get them very close, and we into Schrödinger's, and they're tunneled. Now it's fused. That's what the quantum tunneling made easy is about. Now, the caveat, the catch here is that I'm setting it up such that I have, during that tunnel state, an increased likelihood chance of extra electrons and extra, basically movement of particles or fields that I want to happen. Okay, so like there's photons, sure, whatever, but it's effectively just a reflective photonic resonance inside of a given tube. The electric coal, not electromagnetic, electric coal fields become, this is a charge difference. This one is trying to maintain a similar charge, and initially they are not going to be, so that way when they pop, it's like, no, I don't know, what am I, really, what am I, but it's like, no, you know what you are, like, stop that, okay, you shut up over there, because I'm already telling you what you are, is essentially what that is. I'm already telling you what you are over there, okay, that's what that is. Literally. But again, that's why I call it faux entanglement. It's not really entangled. And it's not that it's not known, because of course, indirectly it's being interacted with fields. So in no way was it ever entangled. But it synchronizes in such a way and interacts in such a way that it gains a given virtualization of its information. That virtualization of information then allows for the one that we're really observing and keeping in a steady state of consistent direction while it travels next to it, then allows for that given extra information we are taking out of both of them during its movement and becoming more and more ordered and kinetically uniform, becomes far more easy to then create a state in which they'll come together and pop into each other once one has effectively, I like to consider it like I have a puzzle piece here, like a receptor that you're able to fit into. That's the charge difference, right? And so like one side suddenly becomes sort of quasi in a superposition and entanglement. As a result, it'll dump over, but in so doing, it happens to create motion and work energy, friction. I set up a given state for it to drop over. It goes in, it's tunneled, it's now fused, but because of the fields that are there, because of the light that is there, it then allows for a higher likelihood chance, probability here, of creating more electrons. And work motion energy, which would be piezoelectrics in this case. Now, that energy has to come from somewhere, which is fine. We have particle accelerators and we have all that. Okay? We already have those things. If you were not aware, we already have those. We have linear accelerator, particle accelerator, we have those. But electromagnetic fields, we've had them forever. electrostatic and electrocharge differences, we've had them. Now, we're talking a right spin that's going to be technically flipped for a technicality-wise period of time that happens to gain during that a slight change in its perceived value of electric charge state, positive versus negative. As it travels, it's then going to be moved over to a positive, but then it now happens to be for the other side set up so that way it can tunnel. As it has tunneled, it now fuses. It doesn't need to travel extraordinarily fast, which is great. It doesn't need to be extraordinarily ordered, which is even better. In fact, the best part about this is it's basically passive. You set up the right kind of barrels, essentially, with the right material in there, the right electromagnetic states and electricity that gets run through, with a little bit of light in the right ways. It then allows for a hydrogen and hydrogen to come together into a helium, or even quarks, for that matter, if you really wanted to get down to it. The reason why I set it up as a concept for myself, like I built it by myself, in my own head, was because it was like, well, this is perfectly fine with quantum foam. If I grab a given possible quasi-particle, virtual scene charge, then I can ultimately use that with a little bit of light and gain back the vast majority of that light's energy, and the vast majority of the quantum foam, and the vast majority of the electricity into extra energy. More Q value than Q value put in, along with work energy that I can then capture 90% of it. It's like it's a capacitor. It wants to head towards that direction anyways. There's less over here thermal dynamic pressure wise, information wise too. And so it has a natural propensity to want to do it. As it accelerates, it becomes more ordered through the given charge, capacitor-like, electrostatic-like, electromagnetic field-like design. As light goes through, it happens to create an ordered resonance of sorts for those given electromagnetic, electrostatic, and charge fields, along with the given fermions that can turn into, at the right time, a more bosonic-like state during its acceleration. It's, in my view, how I view physics and math, very hot and under a large amount of pressure for the direction it's traveling. But from our perspective, it's very cold because it doesn't have any randomization that has occurred other than a lot of its direction and a little wiggle jiggle that we're trying to order in that direction. It's perpendicular versus on directional point. As it's shot at you, it looks very, very hot. From the side, it doesn't look very hot at all, does it? That's why, for me, momenta turned into thermal, which is random, chaotic, and kinetic, which is ordered, directed, uniform. In my math. For quantum physics. Especially my quantum thermodynamics math I do. It's like, that doesn't work or something. And I'm like, I don't care what your stuff is. It never mattered to me. Point is, it's like, well, so far everything's lining up roses and gold. The quantum physicist PhDs are doing the same thing I'm talking about. So I'll tell you what you are over there, entangled people, as I try and make more energy. Instead of making claims, because it's like, that's what it is. It's like, this is an idea. Yours was a hypothesis that you secured funding for and a bunch of fucking other PhDs with gatekeeping rhetoric and all the rest of it that eventually got you to the point where that you were able to then purchase and make these given machines to perform that given experiment and be like, I know. And I was like, what do you know? Sounds like you know how to do logic, basic shit. But the reason why I was talking about it is because I was watching the Plasma channel. Let's see here. He did his MHD design. His MHD drive, designing the next gen marine thruster. I was like, effectively, this is the same thing, but instead of wanting to make tunnel effects, we'd be turning a given type of light-based energy and reflective-based energy into a resonance dump of kinetic order from intake and then off boundary layers into a given area inside of the internal, and then an expansional area at the rear, as it would do like effectively another version of focus, and then thrusting out bell end area. But he's looking more for straight pump, right? And so like that turns into, this is a boundary reduction area in for his eddy currents there at the rear. So as bubble go boom boom expand on boundaries area, because you need stop speaking to like small child that can't understand. Which not really, but like if you're gonna keep resisting the very idea, then shut the fuck up and just listen, because I'll talk to you like that. Be open-minded. Don't do that. He has an electromagnetic. You know what he needs as resistors and ultimately speaking pulsing rates to better be able to take advantage of his given parallel magnetic field? Electrostatic currents that he's trying to use with the given volt and amps he's running. If he pulses that correctly with inside of a given type of design that he already has, which, by the way, is literally the two tubes he's got, then as long as he has for the plastic a given coating on it, allowing for the simplistic electrostatic to be controlled by using basic light, which basically means you're going to put on a coating of a silicon dioxide or quartz. Glass. Glass means you can focus and lens light. Light properly constructively interfered with the natural light around it, or just LEDs that you're going to have anyways to pulse the electrostatic current through, which you happen to have this electricity running through, so you can run them anyways off of that, which now become your type of resistor, which the water is a type of resistor, right? But if you pump it appropriately, instead of constantly having it basically create a boundary layer issue that is inefficient, then as you suck it in, you're then able to create the repulse. So this is attract, and then this is repulse. So attract, repulse, attract, repulse. Then you create a ever increasing, finer and finer and finer and finer to micron sized amounts of push and pull, or pull and push in this instance. Utilizing light, you gain a reduction of a boundary layer, and the expansional cost then gets basically optical tweezer and inertially confined back towards the center. It then will collapse back into its given flow. as it expands the bubble, it happens to have different electrostatic and electromagnetic properties. It starts to align and it creates a resonant frequency pump throughout the given tube that's inside of it. That aligns and orders its given state. The faster it goes, the more efficient it becomes. Not because it's traveling fast, but because the flow rate is traveling fast. Eddy current now gets dumped into actually creating faster current flow for his design. That's actually why I designed it. I had my own version of an MHD concept earlier in my YouTube channel. But it eventually turned into, well, if I'm going to do that, what stops me from using quantum foam or quantum vacuum pressure the very same way? I can use that as an inertial acceleration and a quantum vacuum acceleration. That's my faster than light rocket engine tech. I don't need a given equal opposite propulsion of a given at all gas. It uses the whatever it is for space-time that's around us. Now, I still do thrust some amount of gas to initially start off, but instead of curving gravity, which will eventually happen the faster you go with the inertial acceleration and movement of various electrons and proton nucleuses, right? Which is thermal, but it's an ordered thermal. It has an opposite reaction. Then there's a vacuum I can force in a given area, and then I can push in a lensing effect of space-time. As it concentrates rearwards, you slip into a vacuum ahead that you are already going to, then you bounce off the given space-time behind you, and then reflect yourself back forward, conserving the vast majority of that given energy used to thrust yourself forward. Making it so you need very, very little electricity to go faster than light. Because you can, technicality-wise, once you get fast enough, begin a space-time curvature. But you are never actually traveling faster than light. That's the best part. You don't ever need to. You can just get to near relativistic speeds to start curving things, right? That's what it was for. Now, my quantum tunnel version of this was made specifically so I could make bespoke types of atoms. It's not even a joke. I did do that. So think a bunch of electrons that were held together by a bunch near state gluon and muons that are neutral, or neutrinos, sorry. Right, not muons. They started off as muons and then turned into neutrinos on its way to quantum tunneling together as a bunch of electrons. I would then take a given proton on the inside, like a fullerene. I would then make a muon on the outside that would be with given quarks made to be forcefully stable with a neutrino attached. In a given quark state, gluon state, that happens to make it all stable. Now, it's a heavier electron orbit to a given nucleus. The reason why I did it is because it acts the equivalent like a standard atom, but it's lighter. However, it has relativistic speed impact velocity for any given type of attractive force. Think it still works to a given type of specific any atom that you want to attach it to, right? Because it's a positive to a negative, right? And it looks like antimatter. It's a fake antimatter that I built. But when you fire it at something, or really just allow for any matter to come around, it likes to immediately do a kinetic potential. The kinetic potential then happens to swing a larger nucleus and electron into its near nucleus. Then it repulses off for the electron. The neutron and proton, meaning higher charge, positive particle that it is, happens to bounce because it goes, oh yeah, no, there's a proton inside of that. And I'm positive. Bounces off, even though it initially attracted, and then this will massively accelerate off and do something. But what I designed it specifically for was to sit around various atoms, and with the correct electromagnetic fields that I controlled, it meant I would get a kinetic direction that I could change dynamically as it would bounce, and then everything else would bounce. That's when I used that for my inertial acceleration quantum vacuum thrusters for faster than light. When I used this with that, it meant I didn't ever need any electricity. Just a control of movement, which, because this happens to produce a lot of movement in its own right, I have to absorb it somehow. Inertial dampening came from piezoelectrics. An initial start of movement creates enough of an increase when there's enough of them around that I was able to gain most of it back, and then some because I'm still moving. I didn't get colder. There's some degree of chaotic. Now, I still have to cool it, right? That's how exothermic reactivities happen. People that, generally speaking, say you can't get more out of something, to me end up looking stupid because I'm like, I'm not. I'm using the very definition of what exothermics do. You run a car, most likely, I'm sure. That means you are exothermically reacting a chemical with air, which means you get more out of that, right? This is the same thing. You can't do that because I don't understand it. Whoopie-doo, that's literally how kinetic potential works. Shush. Shh, over there. Apparently you don't understand something. But what that meant was, with a little bit of buoyancy help, a little bit of using the fact that we have a magnetosphere and charge differences in our atmosphere, I was able to literally just fly like I had anti-gravity. It's not. There's no anti-gravity going on. It's a given type of exothermic kinetic redirect potential and buoyancy, which meant I had any and all directed thrust, because remember the exothermic kinetic potential? There's air on the skin and any kind of type of MHD thruster that this guy has, which means I have a very high percentage, in fact, beyond 100% efficiency, because I built a bespoke atom. Now, I wanted to get around that because, of course, if there's a way to, then I can shove it in some stupid people's faces and be like, haha, why didn't you think about this? You're stupid. So I was like, all right, I'll use light. We already have vibrations, momenta. And if I can order it a little bit better with electrostatic and a connection using light, because if you don't know, light reflected in a given way with electrostatic forces and electromagnetic forces happens to create a very consistent resonance that happens to help kinetically align, but also improve the transfer of its given force and separation when those attractive and then repulsive forces happen. So it attracts, it then rips off. During that, it's a field collapse with light that's there that then has a sudden repulse that's going to have, during that field collapse, a given spin that tries to align itself to the given kinetic direction it is traveling, which means you can dynamically ramp up like an RPM on an engine its given amount of pumping for any given amount of volt and amp and current you put in, making it far more viable and more efficient for the amount of electricity I put in, and the amount of light I already have, and the amount of light I can put in electrostatic that is there for the given materials you can have. You gain a greater than 100% efficiency. It's not really, for what it's worth, right? There's light extra in our atmosphere. Water really loves, okay, especially plasma too, with the right light involved and the right dropping of charge states, a excitation into a given photon of wavelength. Constructive and destructive interference models for different types of density and reflectivity and lensing turns into a greater increase of efficiency for the given light effect that we're looking for with the given electrostatic effect that we are able to achieve. And that's how I wanted to talk about Plasma Channel's MHD drive, because I think it's really cool. But it was like, so I'm going to have to tell him that, but it's like, how do I get this across to him? I can't do diagrams. I can't do like any of these things. He probably wouldn't even look my way. Even though, like, in reality wise, this would probably help him out a lot if you could do it right. To have allowed for a given type of spark gap inside of a given, like positive, negative ion deposition electrolysis. Like, but that isn't that like the separation of something? Anyways, the one where you dump metal on something, right? Right. Well, if you make it in such a way that it also happens to have little tiny filaments of glass, but then a little bit of metal, and then you have the right gapping in between, you create little sparks that helps electrostatic effects. That also helps with the electromagnetic alignment during that electrolysis deposition. You create an increased likelihood of control over the effects I'm talking about. It's like, how did you know all that? I went. If you don't notice, I'm basically holding my chin in my hand, and I really just sort of zoned out, looking off into the distance, and then I want you to imagine my brain working. I went, logically this is a thing, logically that is a thing, this is also a thing. So I can combine these things like this. That makes sense. What would have to be going on to make that work? How would I have to do this? And then I did all of that, and then this came out. So I thought about it wee hard. Maybe you could do the same, person that thinks this couldn't happen. So, anyways, I already made this version 1, but then it's like, for what it's worth, there's a better way of doing it. Like, I created a resonance frequency using sound pressure waves inside of quantum vacuum pressures specifically. So, like, quantum vacuum pressure is a thing that we can now no longer have be random. We figured out a way to order quantum vacuum and quantum states like that. So it's like, well, if I shrink and then re-lengthen the tube using the acoustic resonance as a pump, and then utilizing that as a slight alteration and helpful lensing, refraction, diffraction, and resonance of a given wavelength, and a help to with destructive and constructive interferences for the given wavelengths I have, I'm then able to order the states within inside kinetically in a uniform way, because I can not just lengthen, I can also inner diameter widen and inner diameter shrink as a result of that, the tubes I'm using. When I also do that, it creates different flux and current and spin states inside of the given material, making it more efficient at being electromagnetically what I want and electrostatically what I want in a smaller package. They don't have to travel for as long. They more quickly become ordered. They become more easily turned into a quasi-near superposition, quasi-near entanglement that then allows for a movement kinetic to be very, very close, and then a tunnel drop from its given seen as a technicality-wise virtual. Okay, so it's like I set up a bunch of electromagnetic. Let's just go with fields. I like to be a dick about this. So it's like fields, man. I got fields, bro. I got all these fields. I then spunny won the fieldy wheels with lazy lights and other fields around, bro. As a thing moved around and through it did, you know what happened, brah? They started ordering their states in a way that makes them look quasi like they're also the particle I want. As they shrank and then they expanded, and as they moved so slightly, and something moved around inside of it, next to it, it created a pressure variance, man. An indirect given amount of interaction that happens to change its given state and correct itself both forward and rearwards, like the causal set theory suggests, for what it could and could maybe not be, interacting basically to where its state currently is, giving it an uncertain amount for our version, but its version, it's just thermodynamics, dude. A pressure wave in front, a pressure wave in the rear, drag and drag. Anyways, it collapses given possibilities because it then sets up information ahead of time, and then it goes like, oh, so that's what it was? And then it goes like, yo, but what if, brah, I'm right here? And it, what? Yeah, I've been with you the entire time. It's like, oh my god, I love you, bro. Let's be together forever. Fuck yeah, man. Boom, and then they were happily forever, pretty much constantly. And it's like, if you don't know what that really means, it's essentially what I just said. Using some pressure waves in a given material, utilizing that material's change, which is just a programming like any other camshaft in an engine. That's all it is. It's like, well, if I set up the material here, do, and I move it like this, and I do this, and I do a little spin like there, and then I put electricity like this, and a little electromagnetic like that, and some light here, I then get, when I move this through, like about that speed, I then get this consistent output. And behold the helium generators. Utilizing the quantum vacuum pressure around us. I honestly could make that, yeah. I didn't, though. I just used helium, but it had to be a longer tube. It'd be quite a bit more work in that sense, but like it's just longer. Like, honestly speaking, it's just longer. you know. But it's like, no! How come you thought about it. And it's like, I don't know, man. It didn't seem that hard to do. When things become more and more ordered in a given direction, it becomes far, far more easily controlled, so long as you're having the thing around it ultimately travel together with it, and then it in its own right has a increase or decrease of ability to change its given direction of kinetic, instead of needing to hit it perpendicularly really hard or be opposite really hard to be able to change a lot. If it's traveling relative to it, it also happens to have an easier time of moving it. Which is why thermal chaotic tunneling equal poor efficiency, bad Q value, me high Q value, very large amount more. You small Q value, none ever won't be above input. I use a little light and some constructive and a little vibrations, man. And I get out essentially about around 300% more than what I put in. But there's a trick and a caveat there, of course. I was technicality wise using the same amount of energy for that 300%. So it's like that 300% is really, like, let's say it was 100, right? Well, 100 or whatever, right? But it's like this value is shut up as like a capacitor. I'm turning light captured and quantum vacuum captured in a nuclear fusion event captured into a direct to motion, 90% of that, right? And then a extra electron. In this instance, it's about 5 to 10 times an increase of the electrons it would have just had as a standard helium, which is just 2. Well, those electrons don't want to be there and they don't like it. So it's like, oh yeah, no, but guess what? I have some stuff that you might want to be a part of. And it's like, fields, brah. Fields, right? But it's like, these are just electrodes, essentially. It's like, I have too many electrons. I can't hold all these electrons. Well, I'm a negative state that needs more electrons. Okay, I'll go over there. Dun, 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 and it goes off and does that, right? Which turns a piezoelectric and then an electron as a double pulse, which turns it into an AC, which has a ground state that it can go to, which also helps as a Z pinch kind of current of grabbing any given hydrogen back towards the entrance. That will then travel slower at first, but faster as it has to move a given mass, but then it turns into, no, I couldn't really do that, and I jump the gap. And then I set up a bunch of capacitors to start immediately oscillating. As a result, while I do lose a little bit of that, of course, but that's an AC, right? That's going to go back in. So I set it up, and of that 100 I put in, I'm getting more out, which is the kinetic potential. Yep, it's like an exothermic type. It's like, oh no, I put this in and then I did a little bit of this extra, that's the air and that's the chemical, and then it burned and then I got this out. I'm only able to be this efficient really with it, which is technicality wise around a little bit more than 90%, just as an FYI. Okay, momentum has to go and do something, and that's why the piezoelectrics happens to be great, because it's like, well, that feedback loop creates a consistent piezoelectric feedback loop. It'll go and oscillate and create a given amount of consistent resonant frequency pulse of electrons. But then I also get a in-between pulse, like they do with magnetrons, right? Where it's like, well, no, I'm just going to up and then I'll never have it go back down, but right? That kind of thing. But it's like I lose stuff from that, right? But that loss is now making the electricity. Okay, like that loss then gets fed back into the way it orders everything. So So it's like, oh yeah, no, I got this out of it, but then that then just makes the electricity. So it'll never go above, technicality-wise, I am, but not really, because I'm getting energy from light and quantum forces. That's all that is. All right, that's how you have to look at it. It's like, no. There's light here, there's heat momenta, and there's kinetic forces that are amplified as a result of this. With the right material, which I'm using, I am then able to get more out. That's all it is. That's all we've ever done with any engine. That is literally, basically, all we've ever done with any heat engine using any burning of any material. It's a quantum force that we are trying to take advantage of. That's all it is. Right? So, that's why I made quantum tunneling made easy. I wanted to make bespoke atoms. I wanted to go faster than light. I wanted to make very specific types of movement occur for very specific rocket engines that I was planning on trying to make. But then once I got to a certain point, I was like, what the hell prevents me from using quantum vacuum pressure? The hell stops me from using inertial acceleration? Like, honestly, if I just yank it that way and then make a vacuum another way for, like, linged, and then, like, oh, there's a vacuum here, and then it's like, and it's an oscillating vacuum, effectively, and then it's like, well, curvature of space and time, and then this can go over here, but now it can't go over here, because that kind of thing. It's like, that's all I'm doing, and so that means I effectively move faster than the speed of light. Not really, it's not a technicality, but so is the Albuquerque drive. So I don't really see what the problem is. You know what I mean? I can only ever get to whatever a electron could be accelerated to, really realistically, in a nucleus without ultimately everything else having issues. And that's when eventually I started getting into fields using virtual particles, which are, alright, so this electron is going to get turned into a virtual, but only for its given mass information. A field travels at the speed of light, but if I, kind of like what we do right now for like Wi-Fi or, radio waves or whatever, you can make little pockets and kind of concentrate them a little bit with phasers, right? Right? And it's like, well, if I happen to have light that's already there, and then essentially dump its given information, light, as this information is now a virtual particle. It doesn't have mass, it can't have mass, right? But it's attached to the field now. I talked about that in a previous video, but it's essentially like during a electromagnetic field collapse, I then dump a destructive interference into an electromagnetic field, kind of like Hall effect as it's moving, and then they combine into the field because it's at the right frequency and the right resonance. It then entangles to it, and then it essentially kind of rides the wave. Now, it's already traveling faster than light, but it doesn't have information that is traveling that fast. It doesn't really have anything other than, like, if it interacts with something, it'll do something then, right? But because now it has this idea that it has mass, right? It's the idea. It's the virtual. Like, virtuals, particles are effectively, it's an idea, right? It doesn't really have it. It's not really there, but the information's stored. So I guess you do, and it's like those are projections inside of a stock market. The perception of value here in the stock market and the projections of what this is that could, as an evaluation, ultimately means you have this possible stock market individual stock price, And it's like, well, this mass right now is at this. It's only an electron, right? So it's like you can dump in a certain amount of electron to tailor mass values. Protons are a lot harder. Neutrons are a lot harder. But electrons are a lot easier. They're smaller and they're easier to effectively destructively interfere themselves into a given mass value. right? Instead of having positrons, which that's a light-based destructive interference, this one's I will technicality-wise be in a superposition and then drop out into during the entangled state as a virtual that rides the given field. That mass value only dumps in with the correct amount depending on that field of interaction, and it can only do it so much. But because I have c squared, because it's traveling the speed of light, that's right, it's traveling the speed of light, that's the field. Then it has, I'm also light, it's traveling this kinetic information of speed. I have c squared now. That's right. If you can do it with an electron, you can do it with a photon. I have c squared. I don't have mass, though. Oh, wait, yes, I do. It's not really there. Not really. And when it interacts with something, it then can dump a certain amount. It can't accelerate something to the speed of light. Different interactive profiles of different fields around us suddenly are able to dump mass acceleration much more easily. They feel more impactful. Like they'll hit when they wouldn't before. Like a force push. But instead of force push, this is much more, it's just a push. Now, depending on the type of field we're talking about, that's great. It'll slowly go through, and it'll slowly be able to dump in its mass and push as energy, which then turns it into, like special relativity of Einstein says, a given g-force, which is my faux artificial gravity. That's the design of my inertial acceleration with my quantum vacuum pressure, combined with electromagnetic spin and, kind of like for the given Hall effect as it rotates around an atom or a couple of areas of atoms. It then slightly slows down in one, and then it goes back, and that creates an oscillative. And it wants to do boom, boom with the nucleus. Right? And it's like, with the right little conjiggering of that, I'm able to then make a little bit less resistance one area, higher resistance another. I'm then able to reflect it like it's a diaphragm. Bam, boom, 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 boom. And it goes from outwards back towards inwards. That's the redirect. So it's like it bounced off. It has energy that's opposite to that. And it's like that's a reflection resonance. And it could go outwards, but also backwards, but also forwards. We're always trying to have the majority of it head the direction we want, right? Well, yeah. Now you understand why bosonic, fermionic things make no sense to me. It's just pressures. It's thermodynamics. Here's your faster than light travel Kool-Aid. Drink up, I guess. Come on, you're not a cult. Who gives a shit? Everything's a cult. For what it's worth. Everything feels like a cult to me. It's like, no, believe in me, believe in my side, believe in blah blah blah. Stupid. After a while. It's so dumb. It's like, whatever, do whatever the hell you want. But like, this is good to me. Like, I know it works. Everything so far has lined up to being exactly what it is I said. Works. Like, where are the studies? Well, there's one for that one, and another one. It's just like, I don't know, man. Seems like you're just trying to ignore truth around you. Can you tell reality from fiction? You have to do it. Oh, okay, give me some money. Give me some more people that you believe in more than me. Just go ahead. Just do that. No. You want to not gatekeep. You say you don't gatekeep, right? No, I gatekeep. Oh, okay. Well, these are people that you believe in more than me. Go fuck yourself. I'm starting to see the problem here. Yeah, but I'm going to move on because it's like, this is almost an hour. Okay. But the basic principle is this. And instead of ever needing to use, because it's basically light, I turn light into extra with a little bit of electron juice, which has to go somewhere, right? Well, if I was going to control electrons with electromagnetic and some magnets and so on, right? Then it's like, well, this would be a good thing to do that with, right? And then it's like, right, well, here's a tunnel, but by the way, it also means I can fissile. Instead of fuse, I can fissile them out easier. So it's like my old shtick turned into, I'm going to effectively use this as a kind of skin area and also internal. This will create extra electrons, and then using a little bit more with a little bit of the opposite reaction that I really can't fully get, I'll be able to use that to fissile, and then that'll be the exhaust. There's always some amount of hydrogen coming in, and I can always use quantum foam to be fused together into the point where I have what I need. Now I have a faster than light artificial gravity spaceship that creates a tunnel vacuum area. That means I never have to worry about any cosmic rays or how fast I'm going. Begone this idea of particles that will murder you. You can't escape that. Fucking jerks, right? Oh my god, this guy, he just keeps making it so that way he's like better at creating the very things, and you just keep proving him right all the time about all of what he says instead of making claims and all the rest of it. It just turns out he's a very, very smart and intuitive and intelligent and creative in such a way that he knows lots of all of your different degrees and knows how to put them together. It seems in a seemingly better way than what you can do currently. It's almost like there's money involved that prevents him from being able to do what he wants, with you also being involved to help him. Wonder if your ego is having an issue over there at being able to agree that you could work with him. All right, have a good day. Like, subscribe, all that.